Hello mathematical friends, let's go through some examples for GRE 504 midpoint. And before we start that, let's talk about this word midpoint. So midpoint's a fancy way of saying the point that's in the middle. And there's two ways we can find that. First of all, if we have just two numbers, let's say x and y, the middle can be found by just doing x plus y divided by 2 mathematically. Okay, you can also visualize a number line and pick out the number in the middle, but that's one way that we can figure out the middle of two numbers. If we have coordinates, let's say we have coordinates x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2, then the midpoint is going to be equal to, you would add up the x's, x1 plus x2, and divide by 2, comma, and then y1 plus y2 over 2. Kind of ran out of room there, but I would have that formula handy once we deal with coordinates. All right, let's check out some examples here. So from 180-degree skills, the first question says, what is the distance? It doesn't say what's the midpoint, it says what's the distance. So from 4 to 9, I think that's going to be a distance of 5. Those numbers are 5 apart. For number 3, it says, what is the midpoint? And be careful on these questions. This one says distance. These all say midpoint. So let's go ahead and go through this. So what is the midpoint of 4 and 8? So I would just do what we set up here. We can just add them up and divide by 2, and we're going to get 6. And 6 is the midpoint because it's equal distance from 4 and 8. It's 2 away from 4, and it's 2 away from 8. What is the midpoint of negative 2 and 6? Again, I can just add them up and divide by 2. That's going to give me 4 over 2, and that's going to be 2. Because 2, how far is it away from each of those? It's 4 away from negative 2, and it's 4 away from 6. Let's go down to number 8. Number 8 says the midpoint of segment AB is located at negative 3. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little picture here. Midpoint of AB is at negative 3. If A is located at negative 8, what is the location of point B? So now I'm given that this is negative 8, this point here is negative 3. What's the location of point B? Well, I know the midpoint is the same distance from negative 8 as it is from B because it says it's the midpoint. So this distance from right here is negative 8 to negative 3 is a distance of 5, which means this distance has to be 5. And then 5 away from negative 3 is going to put me at 2. Let's go down to number 10. So points A, B, C, and D are plotted on a segment from left to right, and B is located at the midpoint of segment AD. If AD is equal to 12 and CD is equal to 4, what is the length of BC? So I want to know the length of BC, and I'm going to draw a picture. It says A, B, C, D are all in a line in that order, so I'm going to put the endpoints on. A and D are here, and it says that B is located at the midpoint of AD. So I'm going to do a B right there. And then it says that CD is equal to 4, and C is over here. So this distance right here is 4. And it says that AD, all the way from A to D, has a distance of 12. Well, if this whole distance is 12 and B is at the midpoint, that means this distance would have to be half of 12. That means that this distance right here would have to be 2. So BC is going to be 2 in that case. Let's go to the back side. So on the back side, it wants us to find the midpoint of the following, and now we're dealing with coordinates. These are different. We're on a coordinate plane, which is a fancy word of saying grid, and we just are going to use our formula. So to find the midpoint, all we're going to do is add up and divide by 2. So I would do x1, 4 plus negative 3, put it over 2, 3 plus 10 over 2, and then I would simplify those. This is going to end up being a positive 1 over 2. This is going to end up being a 13 over 2, and that is an okay answer. It's okay to have a fraction for a midpoint. All right, let's go down to number 1 on the bottom. It says that one endpoint of a line segment in XY coordinate plane has coordinates negative 3, 8. The midpoint of the segment has coordinates 5, negative 1. What are the coordinates of the other endpoint? So in this one, it's a little bit different than what we've been given. We're trying to find the coordinate of the other endpoint. And we're given the midpoint, and we're given one other endpoint. So I know in order to find this value, which is the midpoint, what I do with the two end coordinates is I add them up and I divide by 2. So I'm going to focus on doing the x first. So I'm going to write an equation. I know that I took -3, one endpoint, plus this endpoint, which is missing, so I'm going to call that x, and divide that by 2. That's going to have to equal my midpoint, which is 5. From there, we got an equation to solve, times 2 on each side. I'd have -3 plus x is equal to 10. Let's add 3 to both sides, and I would get x is equal to 13, which is one part of my coordinate. But we got to do it again. We got to figure out the y value now. So the y value in this part is 8. That's one endpoint. I'm trying to figure out the other endpoint. So my equation is going to be 8 plus y over 2 is equal to, and this will be, it should equal the midpoint, which is -1. Same solving routine. Times 2, times 2. I've got 8 plus y is equal to -2. Subtract 8 from each side, and I end up with y is equal to -10. So my coordinate then is 13, comma, -10. Donezo with that one. All right, let's go down to number 3. It says, what's the midpoint of, and then I'm given fractions, 1/2, comma, -3/4, and -1/4, comma, 2/5. Okay, just because these are fractions doesn't mean my process is not the same. I'm still going to use my midpoint formula. So I'm going to do that work over here. So I'm going to do 1/2 plus -1/4 over 2. That's going to be the x value. And I've got some work to do here. This is called a complex fraction when you have fractions within fractions. But on the top here, to simplify this, I'm going to get a common denominator. And that common denominator is going to be 4. So this would end up being 2 plus -1 over 2, or it's going to end up being 1/4 over 2. So when I have 1/4 divided by 2, the way I would do that is I would just put this over 1, which is okay because 2 over 1 is equivalent to 2. And now I'm dividing fractions. And I know that I divide fractions by keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to change it to multiplication. I'm going to flip this guy to 1/2. And so the x value then is going to be 1/8. Let's do the y value then. Let's rewrite that, or write out our problem we're doing. So the y value is going to be -4/3 plus 2/5 over 2. Let's get a common denominator on top, and I'm going to end up with 15 for my common denominator between these guys. And 3 to 15 is times 5, so I'll do the top times 5. 5 to 15 is times 3, so I'll do the top times 3, and it'll be over 2. Okay, let's simplify that top. I'm going to end up with -14 over 15 over 2, and then same process. I'm going to put this over 1, and I'm going to keep, change, flip. So I would have -14 over 15 times 1 over 2, and when I multiply, I go straight across, but I have some cross reducing here. I think I can take a 2 out of each of those. And this would end up being -7/15. So my coordinate then is going to be 1/8, comma, -7/15 for that one. So hopefully that's enough structure for you to get through the rest of the sheet. Go ahead and finish up those problems on your own and let us know if you have any questions.